We published the original set of 12 case studies in 2009, and we left some hanging questions at the end of each case study. We pointed out things that we thought were going very well for a certain project, and we also pointed out things that we felt might be challenges. Then a year went by, and the global economy suffered a lot of setbacks, and we thought, wow, this might be a chance to see how strong these models were. So we went back 2 years later, and probably most of them, maybe with very few exceptions, had suffered some financial setbacks as a result of the economy. That said, they were all taking very interesting steps to remedy this, and this was what the really interesting thing for us to see was. In some cases where a particular revenue target wasn't being met that they thought they could do through a particular means, they shifted gears and tried something else. And sometimes this something else was working quite well. One of the themes that ran throughout many of the cases we studied was when things got tough, if they were lucky, they had a very reliable host institution sitting behind them. And this was a really critical factor for many of these projects. A lot of the projects that were still doing quite well were the ones that had developed a very strong audience, a strong loyalty among the people who were their users. And in some cases, this was reflected, it's the easiest to see in some cases, in a subscription model. The entities we saw that had created subscription models that were long-standing saw very little fall-off, and in fact, sometimes little increases. And that was fascinating to us because we imagined we might see a much more dramatic story there. On the other hand, a project just beginning to try to create a subscription model and to build that up from the ground up was having some challenges because, and again, it's a difficult economy and those are hard choices, particularly for libraries to make right now. But once that audience has been established and the value of that resource was established with their audience, it was extremely solid, and this formed the basis of a very strong model for them. We developed something called the Framework for Post-Grant Sustainability Planning, which is a very grand way of saying, what are you going to do once the grant ends? It involves several steps. The first one, most obviously, being define what it is, what your goal would be for the impact of this resource post-grant, because that really will drive everything else. If the goal of creating something was simply to have created it, maybe there isn't much that you need to do after. But that's the case for very few of the projects that we study. Instead, it's a question of defining what the set of goals are that you need, the activities around a whole suite of different topics. So there might be sustainability goals around content. You might decide that not just does the content have to persist and stay available, but it has to grow and be developed and enhanced. You might decide that technology is going to be very important because the software it's built with is going to have to improve its functionality and there are going to have to be new things built all the time there. You might think about the ongoing enterprise. If this is considered to be a resource that continues on for a long time, it's going to need leadership. It might need new expertise brought in as it continues to grow. So there are going to be a set of activities over there as well. Once those activities have been defined, you can figure out what it's going to cost to implement them, and then you can think about how you're going to go obtaining the funding and the resource to pay for that. So the framework is really just a way to break down the sustainability question into all of its component parts and to think it through step by step. Funders play a tremendous role in encouraging the sustainability of the digital resources they fund. They obviously have an interest. They don't make the investment because they want to see something disappear, right? Most often, the goal for funding this sort of digital resource, something that includes a tremendous amount of content and a lot of startup time, these are not the experiments that are meant to just, let's see what happens. When a funder is making an investment in digital resource, the question of sustainability comes up frequently, but what we found when we studied this is that the definition is really still a bit up for grabs. When some people talk about it, to them, sustainability means making something openly available. For others, it's a question of preserving digital preservation, so the stability of the digital object. And for others, it means something else. With our report, what we tried to do was to map out all those definitions in a framework so we could understand what the real questions at play were. Any project that is conceiving of creating something that they want to last for a long time needs to be thinking about who this audience is likely to be and who's going to get the most out of this from the earliest stages. And that, in a lot of ways, will drive everything else. Which is not to say that their first concept of who an audience is will not change. These things will change and develop, and you'll discover new things about that over time. But the audience and the people who'd find value from it, whether they are users or funders or something else, is going to be the support network for that resource. It's going to be the people who prove that it had impact and did the thing you wanted it to do, and it may be the people who end up writing a check and helping to pay the bills as well.